Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something huge, what's being called the single biggest overhaul of India's workforce rules in its entire history. We're talking about the new labor codes, and believe me, this isn't just a small tweak. It's a complete rewiring of the relationship between millions of employees and their employers.
So for decades, if you were a business or a worker in India, you had to navigate this incredibly dense web of 29 different central laws. I mean, some of these rules were ancient, dating all the way back to the British era. It created a system that was, frankly, a mess to get through.
Well, all of that has been completely transformed. That whole complicated structure has been collapsed, boiled down into just 4 streamlined codes. You've got one for wages, one for industrial relations, one for social security, and one for occupational safety. This is a massive, massive change that's going to touch hundreds of millions of people.
But what's the real story here? Is this a truly revolutionary step forward that builds a modern, fair system for everyone? Or does it tip the scales, creating more fragility and insecurity for the Indian workforce? That is the big question we're digging into today.
Okay, let's get into it. The main reason for this giant overhaul was the feeling that the old system had turned into a legal jungle. For companies trying to deal with dozens of different laws, multiple registrations, endless paperwork, it was seen as a huge roadblock to actually growing a business.
So the big promise from the government and industry was all about one thing: simplicity. The goal was to boost the ease of doing business. So, instead of that confusing mess, the new system is basically a one-stop shop. We're talking one registration, one license, one return to file. The hope is that this will cut down on all that red tape and get more businesses into the formal economy.
But, enough about the high-level stuff. Let's talk about what this means for you, for pretty much every single person with a job in India. Because these codes are changing the very definition of your salary, the rules of your contract, and your rights at work. This is the stuff you really need to know.
All right, maybe the most fundamental change of all is a brand new standardized definition of wages. For the very first time, there's one single definition that applies across all 4 codes. And this is a huge deal because that number is the foundation for calculating all your Social Security benefits, like your retirement fund and your gratuity.
And it's all built around this new 50% rule. Basically, it says that your core pay, your basic salary, and so on, has to be at least half of your total compensation. The other half can be all your allowances. Now, here's the catch. This might actually mean your monthly take-home pay goes down, but the trade-off is your long-term savings, like your Provident Fund, will get a serious boost since the contributions are based on a bigger core salary.
There's also a huge shift for contract workers, who are now officially called fixed-term employees. The new deal is they get many of the same benefits as permanent staff. But the real game changer here is gratuity. You used to have to wait 5 years to get it. Now, a fixed-term employee can get a pro-rata payout after just 1 year of service. That makes short-term gigs a whole lot more secure.
The codes also shake up your daily work life. For instance, there's now flexibility for a 12-hour workday. But, and this is a big but, the weekly limit is still a hard 48 hours. That could open the door for a 4-day work week for some. Overtime is now clearly defined and has to be paid at double your normal rate. And importantly, women can now work night shifts, but only if they agree to it and their employer provides mandatory safety and transportation.
Okay, let's get to the heart of the controversy, because while the goals sound good, simplicity, worker welfare, the reaction has been anything but simple. This is where the real debate kicks in. On one side, you've got the government and its supporters. They're calling these codes a truly historic achievement, a landmark move that's going to modernize India's entire labor market, bring in investment, and create more stable, protected jobs. But then you look at the other side, and the picture is completely different. Major trade unions have called these reforms nothing short of a direct attack on workers' rights. They don't see simplification. They see a systematic weakening of protections that have been fought for over decades, all to make life easier for employers. And you can see this clash on just about every major point. Let's take layoffs. The government raised the company size for needing government permission for layoffs from 100 to 300 employees. They say this helps smaller firms be more agile, but the unions say it just makes it way easier to hire and fire, which kills job security. It's 2 totally different ways of looking at the exact same rule. Is it flexibility, or is it just precariousness?
So let's step back from the debate and the text of the laws for a second. The biggest question of all might just be about reality. Can these massive, ambitious codes actually be put into practice across a country as huge and as diverse as India?
Well, here's one giant hurdle: the huge difference in minimum wages. An unskilled worker in Delhi, for example, makes almost twice what a worker in parts of West Bengal earns. When you have gaps that big, trying to set up a national minimum floor wage, which is a key promise here, gets really, really complicated.
Even the way the laws are enforced is changing. The old-school labor inspector, who was often seen as someone just there to hand out fines, is being reimagined as an inspector-cum-facilitator. The new job description is to advise first, help businesses comply, and only use penalties as a last resort. The idea is to build a more cooperative system.
And this, right here, might be the biggest piece of the whole puzzle. The central government passed the code, sure, but labor laws are a concurrent subject, which means every single state has to draft and approve its own rules to match. And that rollout has been pretty slow and very uneven. So you have this national plan on paper that isn't a reality everywhere on the ground just yet.
So all this leads us to the final, big question. What's next? As these codes slowly start to take effect, they could send India's massive workforce down one of two very different roads.
I mean, the stakes here are incredibly high. The best-case scenario is a future of flexibility, where this new, simpler system leads to a dynamic workforce with better social security for everybody. But the flip side is a future of fragility, where weaker rights create more job insecurity, and the reforms just never quite match the reality of the workplace.
Look, the success of this whole grand experiment comes down to one thing: effective, fair implementation on the ground. So the question that we're left with is a big one. Will these codes build a future that's more flexible and secure for India's workers, or will they introduce an era of greater fragility? The final chapter on the true legacy of India's new work life, well, that's still being written.